I have with me in studio today my friend, one of the most brilliant people I've ever had the privilege of having a conversation with. None other than best-selling author, internationally renowned business scaling coach, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Dr. Ben, great to have you here.
Myron.
Always a pleasure.
Again?
Again.
We're doing it again?
We're gonna run the play again. So I've read all of your books, and I've read all of your books, and in those books that I've read, I noticed that you have a unifying theme in all of your books, and I've never heard anybody talk about this before. And your unifying theme seems to be from how to live a progressively productive life and do it exponentially. All of the books talk about that, even if it doesn't seem like they do. And so here's what's fascinating to me about that. That theme is the first thing that God ever said when he spoke to a human. God said, be fruitful, which means to produce on the outside based on what God planted on the inside of you. He said, multiply, which means to increase. He said, replenish, which means to fill up the earth, and subdue it, which means to bring it under control. It means to trample, but to bring it under your control, because disruption always follows intention. And then he said, and have dominion. All of your books point to that. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So here are the book titles, and if I'm missing one, let me know. But you got personality isn't permanent, right? You've got the gap and the gain, who not how, slipstream, 10x is easier than 2x, and scaling. Did I miss any of the books?
Yeah, I think there was Be Your Future Self Now in there, and Willpower Doesn't Work.
Oh, Be Your Future Self Now and Willpower Doesn't Work. Those two. Okay, good. So that's all your books, but they all have a unifying theme. So personality isn't permanent shows you that you can become the 10x version of yourself, right? The gap and the gain shows that if you will focus on the 10x version of yourself and the 10x version of your goal instead of who you used to be, right? And you measure yourself based on how far you've come.
And how different you are from your past self.
And how different you are from your past self instead of how far you are from your future self. That's a way to be progressively productive. I noticed that who not how, we talked about this a little while ago, but who not how, the 10x results that you're looking for are on the other side of a who, not the other side of a how.
Amen.
Right? And it's really on the other side of several who's. And then slipstream, that's my favorite. I love all of them, but slipstream is you actually get to experience life. It's not how you say it, but you can straighten me out on all of this. But you get to live a longer experience of life in the same number of years that you would have lived just by learning how to slipstream, which is mind-blowing. 10x is easier than 2x, which is not just that 10x is better than 2x, but it's actually easier because you have to remove so much of what you're doing. So you don't 10x by doing more, you 10x by doing less. And then scaling, which is your concept of using power laws to figure out what is the one thing. It's interesting that all of those things, personality isn't permanent, which means you don't have to stay stuck being who you perceived yourself to be in the past. Willpower doesn't work, shows us that we will never behave consistently in a way that's inconsistent with how we perceive ourselves. So your ability to crystallize crystallize principles down into like bite-sized chunks so we can digest how to live a progressively productive life and apply these 10x scaling strategies to our lives is mind-blowing. Have you ever thought about how all that stuff works together in that thematic way before? Or probably have.
How I look at it is that, it was kind of like what you said when we were talking earlier, that your past self would not have been able to imagine even where you're at today.
Sure.
But now you're imagining things
way beyond.
Yeah, I would say that for my past books, there were great principles in there, and I'm just trying to just keep learning. And I think that different books are probably relevant to different people on different parts of their journey. Progression. And I'm just trying to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And one of the things that I had to do actually to go full on in scaling was lose probably 90% of my audience or more. I have a very broad email list that I grew for a long period of time, and with what I'm writing about right now, not only am I writing specific to entrepreneurs, which is probably 10% of my old audience, but I'm focusing on the 3% of entrepreneurs that want to go 10x. And so it's been a shift where I have focused way deeper and way more specific versus broad, and so it was a conscious decision, but it was a scaling decision to go specific rather than broad, and to raise the floor on the audience. Even though I love the audience, it was like, I'm going to just focus on these people, because you help one of these people and it's going to make a million X impact.
Right. Again, that's a who.
Correct.
Right?
And who you decide to
who you
serve.
Who you decide to serve. And that's like, it's really interesting. Who you decide to serve, who do you decide to model, who do you decide to become, all of that scaling, 10x, power law stuff is on the other side of a who.
Big time.
So why is it that people then, if they really desire to have this goal, why do they resist, from your perspective, the only things that can get them to the goal that they desire?
Such a beautiful. I mean, we all resist the thing that God wants us to do now, right? And even just, that's why we have fear. That's why and so, I mean, that resistance isn't a bad thing. You know, it's always going to be there. Even Stephen Pressfield, right, who wrote, I think, The War of Art, talks all about resistance. So that resistance is actually like the signal. It's a good thing. You just have to go through it, right? Like you're never going to just be without resistance. Like that resistance. Well, and so the question is, are you going to lean into it? Are you going to act despite it? Like, you're going to have fear, you're going to have resistance. So that's what's going to stop 99% of people. One of my favorite concepts is psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is facing that resistance or the emotions or the difficulties and still operating from the goal, still operating at a higher value and going through it, whereas psychological rigidity means, oh, the emotions are there, the resistance is there, I'm going to default back to my past self. So it's just like, the resistance is there, how fast and how often are you going to go through it? And how much are you going to lean into it? And what level of resistance are you willing to face?
Wow. And
you can get straight through 10x versions of resistance pretty quickly. If you just operate from the future, you can make some decisions that your past self would have been plagued by, paralyzed by, and you just go through it, and then you can handle things that would stop almost everyone.
Operate from the future. That's such a beautiful concept, and it's a beautiful concept because when I think about what causes people to quit and what causes people to keep going under the same circumstance, is my ability to replace in my own mind. I think this might be what you mean when you say psychological flexibility, maybe not, but when I replace in my own mind the anxious apprehension of the outcome I don't desire, right? So I'm looking at this objective, this goal that I have, but I also know that if I take this on, the possibilities of this opposite thing happening is also there.
Yep.
And so I have so much anxiety around this thing that I don't want to happen, that it apprehends or stops me from doing the thing that I desire to happen. So I have to learn how, in real time, to replace the anxious apprehension of the outcome I don't desire with the joyful anticipation of the outcome I do desire. Both of them are future visions of my experience. One of them produces doubt, anxiety, and powerlessness, but the other one produces faith, anticipation, and power. Is that what you mean when you say thinking, like operating, acting from the future?
Operate from the future that you want. Operate from the goal. Yeah, when you start projecting a negative future, that's a future you want to avoid, right? And so they can't.
And so now you've got an avoidance-based goal.
Yeah, there you go.
Instead of an advancement-based goal.
Yeah, avoid or approach. And so if you're spending all your time trying to avoid a certain future, first off, you're focused on that.
Wow.
And so you don't want avoidance-based goals, right? Obviously, there's things you want to avoid, but you don't want to be thinking about a future you want to avoid all the time. You want to think about the future that you want to create.
Cool. It makes perfect sense. So I had a conversation with a new friend of mine, and he's a very interesting guy because he started his business in 2019, and when he started that business, he started it because of something that his wife said to him, and she challenged him big time, and so he went into this grand search, and so he started a business. He was a car salesman. If anybody's ever been in car sales, you know that that's like from sun up to way past sundown, right? And you're talking about half days, 12 hours a day, right? Right? And so he started this business where he started teaching car salespeople how to sell more cars instead of selling cars himself. And he went all in on a strategy. I'm not going to say what the strategy is, but he went all in on a strategy because that's not the point. And I said, so how much revenue did you do your first year in business? He said, none. I said, how much did you do your second year? He said, 40 million. He started his business in 2019. 40 million. I said, how much did you do last year? This was in 2026 I asked him this. How much did you do last year? He said 200 million.
It's a great scale.
Right. It's a great scale. And so from 2020 to 2025, grew his business to $200 million. And so it made me realize, wait a minute. This guy, first entrepreneurial endeavor of his life, starts a business, and in his 5th year does $200 million in revenue. How? Here's how. Who? He doesn't just teach car sales anymore. He just teaches sales in general. But he teaches the mega Fortune 500, Fortune 100 corporations. And so serving that higher level who gave him the ability to reach far more people because he reached the people who had the people he wanted to serve. And so in having that conversation with him, I realized that every time I've leveled up in my life, I just changed my who. And when I changed my who, it elevated everything. It elevated everything. And so I'm going to be having a conversation with him in May. We're going to be spending some time together. We're going to probably spend at least a half a day together, maybe a whole day together. And I'm going to start serving at the corporate level as opposed to just individual entrepreneurs, because it'll give my mission greater reach, but it'll also help me become a better version of myself. So as I'm sharing that with the scaling genius, the best scaling genius that I know, what are some of the things that I need to be aware of that I might be missing on the way to 10xing, 100xing my over 3 years, probably 100xing my business?
Yeah. So we're going to operate from $1 billion a year in revenue because we already know 100 million's deep in play.
Right.
Deep in play. So $1 billion in revenue.
Can you define deep in play? So
for you, we were having a conversation 20, 30 minutes ago, and you already see it.
Oh, yeah.
You already know it.
Yeah.
And so that's something that is already deep within your realm of mastery, right? You obviously can still hit some roadblocks, but it's well on its way, right? And so if we were to crank it now to $1 billion a year in revenue, in 2 or 3 years, we'd want to say what is a not realistic, but what's a quantified model or pathway to that, right? You could then break it down to a number of clients, right? And then what would the price point of that have to be?
Right. And work my way backwards from
Yeah,
math.
it might
That's
need
what I've always done.
so if it's 10 million in engagement, then you still need 100 of those.
Right.
To get to $1 billion. And so if that's, so you quantify a model, let's just say you want 100 clients at 10 million a pop, right? That then becomes the floor. And now you know that it has to be a 10 million plus engagement to work with you. Then you can quantify obviously out or lay out what's the value prop for those people you're going to serve at that level, and who's the audience at that level. Right back to who.
Right back to who.
And think about how far that differentiates you even from your current self.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean, that takes you further and further out on that bell curve power law potential, right? And so that's, I think, the start is the goal shapes the model, it sets a floor, and it then determines who you are, because you're going to define yourself a little bit differently.
A lot differently.
There you go. So you're going to define yourself and what you do and how you help those people differently. So it differentiates you and specifies you. It allows you to become hyper-specific. And then back to the idea, what you taught me just recently is now you're solving a different problem for a different person. So what are you solving for those people at that corporate level? You already have the mastery, and you know they don't have it.
I know they don't have it, because every time somebody attempts to sell something to me, it's a horrible experience.
Yeah, so think about how much more valuable it is at the level that they're at.
Right.
Because they're stuck and stagnant. It took them decades to get there. Think about how much more valuable your knowledge is in their context.
Right, exactly.
It's like it's quantum leaps above the same teachings to a different person. They have the leverage, they just don't have the knowledge.
100%.
And so yeah, quantify out the model, and then from there we can start to develop what are the pathways, who are the who's, how do we start getting in front of these 100 people, how do we speak their language, how do we become signal to them, right?
Exactly.
But it's nice to have the goal, the model, the floor, and then who are we serving and who are you, so that you're signal to them. And are you willing to raise that floor for long enough to go get that first one? Because right now you've already got the mastery and the attraction at your current level.
Sure.
People are going to be coming to you, and what happens, I think raising the floor is a test.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a psychological, I even think it's a spiritual test to say, and I'm just using this model that I made up as an idea.
No,
if it's 10 million per engagement that they pay you per year, and that you're going to help make them billions because that's where they're at in
Right.
their revenue, and your sales knowledge is going to help them get there. Once you actually set that floor, you're going to immediately be tested 100 different ways if you're willing to hold that floor. You're going to start getting the best opportunities you've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be below that floor. And it's
Well
going to be
below that
hard
floor.
to say no to that. You're going to have to hard look at a lot of different things in your existing system, your team, your capability, the clients that are very reliant and love you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to find a way to say, not
No.
now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just, this
Yeah.
is the new focus.
Right.
And so it tests the heck out of you.
Mm.
Even things that you're not thinking of are going to be so compelling that are going to try to stop you from setting and holding that new floor and operating from that future. That whatever it is you set, that's just a model. That might not be the model you choose. You might have different. You might say 200 at 5 million, or you might say 1,000 at 1 million, or you might say 10 at 100 million. Right? So you'll set the model that you want to play at, and who you want to serve, and how you want to play, and how you want to be defined, and the impact you want to have. But yeah, setting that floor, holding that floor is the true test. And once you get the first at that new floor, your psychology changes forever.
Right.
Once
100%.
once you actually get the first above that floor,
Right.
your confidence is now at that level. Now you can go get the next 10.
Right. And it's so fascinating that you say that, because I've already experienced that so many times in the past. And what's really interesting is most people think that when you change your who and you elevate your who to go help that new who get a better result than they've been getting, like you help them break through to their new level of whatever that new who is for them. Most people think that's going to be harder, but it's actually so much easier. So much easier. Like I'll take one of my recent VIPs, for instance, like Richmond Din, guy from Australia. He has to fly for 14 hours just to get here, right? And this guy paid me $350,000 last year, and he couldn't even conceive in his mind how to make a $100,000 offer, right? He could not, like, well, who do you sell it to? What do you have to do, you know? And he had so much internal resistance, but I pushed him past his resistance. And when I say I pushed him past his resistance, that's what I did. I pushed him past his resistance. Anyway, it was easier for me to help him go from 3 million to 10 million in 1 year.
Yep.
Than it is for me to help somebody who's stuck at $1,500 a month in their business to get to $100,000 a year, because he's already used to just breaking through the resistance, because he's already done it so many times before. So even though he doesn't know how he's going to do it, he knows that he can do it.
He's got the reps of breaking through to a new ceiling.
Yes.
You know, and then setting a new
Yes.
floor. He's got the
Yes.
reps. Yeah, it's there's something I lost it. It'll come back to me, Myron. But yeah, so for example, to get that first win above the floor, you're so right that he was afraid to set that $100,000 price point.
Right.
And so he was operating from the lower self, from the past self, and so it wasn't signal. But you're right, it's not harder. Those people actually need it more. So we actually just did a study on 1,000 companies, and we're looking at their belief about their ability to scale, and whether they were growth-minded or scale-minded. And what was interesting is that 99% of companies are below 10 million revenue. In the U.S., 99% of all companies are below 10 million revenue. And so those 99% of people below 10, which is understandable, they have far less belief in their ability to scale than someone who's at 50 or 100 million. Right? And so someone who's at 100 million revenue, even if it took them decades to get there, which is fine, you know, maybe they linearly grew there over a long period of time, they did have to break through several thresholds of identity, ability, resistance to get to that level. And so to your point, they have the reps of knowing they can do it, but also they're willing to implement the resources to get there, get new resources, cut things that won't get there. So the people who are at higher level, and so the reason I say all this to all of you is you can apply those same things even if you're at 100,000, or
Right.
if, you can apply those same principles that bigger companies are willing to do. But most people under $1 million absolutely aren't thinking at scale. They're thinking at what we would call growth, which is where they're letting their past shape their future. So I'm at 100,000, let's go for 200,000, rather than I can get to 5 million. What are the pathways to get to 5 million? So people under $1 million, people under 10 million less than 5% of them think they can scale. Less than 5% of them would even aspire to scale. And so think about it, they're not even thinking from that mentality. And so they're keeping all of these things that are below the floor. They're not willing to raise that floor.
Well, so it sounds like the question that you don't ask is the answer that you can't get, right? Or the question that you're unwilling to ask is the answer that you can't get. And the better questions you ask, the better answers you get. Like, how do I get to 10 million from $500,000 a year is a better question than how do I get to 600,000 a year. That's a better question. So it automatically gives you better answers. Better answers produce better results.
And here's a hard one that I learned with one of our scalers is you can't get to scale by solving for growth. So for example, that person who's at 500,000 trying to solve for 600,000, that's such a different set of decisions. You know, if I'm at 500,000, I'm going for 600. I can keep most of my team, my operations. I can keep my existing products, my same client base. Like all of that stuff is antithetical. It's the opposite of what would get them to 5 million or 10 million. And so you can't get to 10 million by solving for how do I get to 600,000.
Right.
So you can't get to scale by solving for growth.
Right. So define scale and growth for this YouTube live. So tell everybody what's the difference between growth mindset, scaling mindset, designing for growth versus designing for scale.
So growth is just simply the idea of you take your past and your present and you do more of it. So you base your objective, you base your goal on where you're currently at or what you've achieved before. So it's like, okay, we did 500,000 revenue in our business last year, so let's go for 6 this year, right? And that's 20%. I mean, actually, it might be a little bit more, but that would seem like good growth. Scale is just on a completely different level. For us, it's at least 10x in 3 years or less, right? Because that's just a much higher scale. So if you're 500,000,
at least 10x.
Yeah, it's at least 10x, right? Like that's a massive scale up, and that's just a different game. And scale and growth are two different games. And so going for 5 million from 500,000 is going to force a much higher floor, a more specific model, a more specific audience, probably a different value proposition, and a different team. A team to get to 5 million is, you might not even need that much of a team to get to 600,000, right? And so now you're just, you need operations. You need a lot of different things to get to 5 million or 10 million, and so it's just a different game. And you can't get to that game by solving for growth. The analogy that one of our scalers and clients gave is just the idea of a mall, right? He said he was very linear his whole career, and so he said I used to think that I had to like operate a kiosk and like really know everything about a kiosk before I could get to the level where I'm running stores, right? And eventually I could run stores, and once I got really good at that, it might take me several years. Then eventually I could get to the level of managing or owning a mall.
Wow.
And so he's just like, now I realize that I could just go straight from reverse engineering the mall, which would be scale. And if I'm reverse engineering the mall, it's going to be a completely different game and a different path. And I'm not going to necessarily need to know how to master the kiosk or the store levels. Like that knowledge isn't required. And so it's just a different game. And so you don't get to scale by solving for growth. You have to start from scale, and it's going to be a different path. It's going to be a different game entirely, including, as you know, different who's that are going to help you get there. Completely different who's. And the main point is that it's not harder. Actually, the main point is that there's less competition at that level, depending on the goal. And so it's actually easier.
It's actually easier, and you're actually doing less, but more signal and less noise.
Yeah.
That's what you're actually doing more things that matter and fewer things that don't.
Yeah, the higher scale is all going to be more and more about leverage, which is going to come through who's and resources, whereas the lower levels are going to be through effort and work, right? And so you still need work, you still need mastery, but there's different leverage behind it. And so it can go so much further.
Right, because with leverage, a minimal input produces a magnified output.
Yeah, and that's where we're getting to power laws. But yeah, critical analysis of finding the few inputs that create almost all the outputs, including who's, different who's. At the kiosk level, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are available. At the mall level, now you've dropped down to far less who's, and so they're actually easier to find because you have to filter a lot harder. And so there's less of them. And so you got to find the signal more. The floor is higher.
So when somebody who's got a business that's stuck at, I don't know, $500,000 a year, 700,000 a year, or maybe they're stuck at 120,000 a year. It doesn't really matter.
Sure, 100,000 a year.
100,000 a year. What is the process for them at, like, if somebody's stuck at 100,000 a year, what would you recommend their future goal be that they should start working backwards from? And like, literally, like, step by step, what do they do first? Let's say I'm stuck at 100,000 a year. And you're going to help me scale from there. Like, and I need a better goal than 200,000. So what would ideally the goal be for me if I'm stuck at 100,000?
I mean, at least $1 million. But the beauty of goals, as I understand them, and even just the future and the past, is that these are tools, right? So the goal is a tool for identifying options and pathways in the present. And so, you know, you could. We would at least say, let's get you to $1 million in 3 years. That's an at least. But we might say using the goal as a tool. We don't have to use it to define ourselves. We don't have to use it to have imposter syndrome and now get paralyzed. No, we're using it as a tool for looking honestly at what are you doing now that has any signal to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What's fun is, so the first step would be set a goal and use it as a tool. It doesn't have to be perfect, but a goal properly set is halfway reached, according to John Doerr, because it starts to eliminate options and identify potential paths and people. And so in the beginning, we might just set a 10x goal and start to think about models and pathways to getting there.
And let's say I'm going to do that. How do I overcome the internal angst about that goal long enough to actually even figure out how to reverse engineer from there? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because, okay.
Use it as a tool. So for example, a lot of our scalers, they wait for a long time to think about a goal that seems impossible. Because for a lot of people, a 10x in 3 years seems impossible. That's actually its beauty, by the way, because it forces you to start thinking from the future rather than the past. And so usually for most people, it helps to just say, let's use this as a tool. Because then we can be more psychologically flexible. We can change the tool. We can think at $1 million. We can think at 10 million. We can think at 100 million. If we're willing to use it as a tool for analyzing options and paths, we don't have to do anything right now to make a decision. We're just going to we're going to use that future, that higher scaled goal, just to look at options. And so a lot of times just thinking about it as a tool allows people to put their guard down. Mm-hmm. They don't need to be so stressed out, so fearful. Like, remove the anxiety.
If I don't reach this, I'm going to...
And that's part of psychological flexibility. Let's just use this thing as a tool to think about, let's be honest, what's below the floor? What are all the things you're saying right now that are costing you a lot by continuing to say yes to, and that the floor would go up dramatically if we were operating from that higher goal? Mm-hmm. But then what happens is that if you just allow yourself to think from the goal, think from scale. Again, if it's at $1 million, if it's at 10 million, whatever, you start to think about pathways to get there. Once you actually start to quantify out a pathway, it stops seeming as impossible. Once you actually start to generate thoughts and pathways, all of a sudden, because you're actually thinking about it and you're thinking from the goal, the more you start to put structure to it, the more it starts to be like, oh, we can do this, And so once
I got this.
Yeah, once you start to clarify and quantify it, you're like, oh, there are ways to do it. I don't know exactly how we're gonna get there, but I can start to see the path. It stops to seem impossible. So like quantifying it reduces a lot of the stress. It allows you to start to find ways to raise the floor. So just thinking from the goal, giving yourself enough time to do that, and not being defined by it. It really helps. I'll just give one example. So there was a guy who read The Science of Scaling. He was a CTO of a company, Chief Technology Officer. Yeah, he read the book. They were at an amazing technology startup doing $6 million revenue, and they had taken out a ton of funding. And so like they'd taken out 20 million. They got like 20 million plus of funding. They were at 6 million, and the systems were just trash. Like it was a rough startup, like many startups are. Mm-hmm. But he read The Science of Scaling, and he's like, what are we doing? He's the goal was to get to like 20 million revenue in the next year or two. So it was still a 2x, but they had taken on a lot of funding. And he thought, why aren't we going for $1 billion? Like, why aren't we going for $1 billion in this company? So he went to his boss, and he said, why aren't we going for $1 billion? He's like, this is an incredible company. We've taken funding.
I would have loved to see the look on his boss's face.
Yeah, and his boss knew that we were going for 20. And so his boss said this. His boss said, we can get to $1 million, but it's going to take us 15 years.
You mean $1 billion?
Yeah, we can get to $1 billion, but it's going to take us 15 years. And so this guy, this CTO, just, we call it using time as a tool. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Using time as a tool, whether it's timelines or scales, right? Mm. Just using the future as a tool to analyze potentials in the present or pathways in the present. And so what he said to his boss is, all right, it's going to take us 15 years, but if we had to do it in 3, how would we do it?
That's a great question.
Yeah, if we had to do it in 3, what? And honestly, the boss sat there for a second, and again, he was just using it as a tool. If we had to do it in 3, how would we do it? And the boss thought about it, and he said, we would have to get it into 10,000 schools. And then all of a sudden he said, we could totally do that. So he quantified a path, and he's like, oh, now is all we have to solve for is how do we get into 10,000 schools, right? And so it's like, and so just by thinking about it from scale in a different timeline, and now that's their goal. Now that is their goal. Like now they're going for $1 billion in 3 years, and now they have a new path and a new focus, and now they're building the team to do it, and they're solving the distribution to do it. Whereas before they were going for 25, 30, wow. Who knows what they were doing?
Wow. So that single question eliminated all the noise.
And it showed him exactly the path.
Showed the exact path. Like one question can do that. That's mind-blowing.
But that path couldn't have been solved, couldn't have been figured out, and everything about that path could not have gotten them there if they were solving for the growth of getting to 25 or 30 million from where they were then at 6 million. They were going such a complex, difficult direction that it would have taken them a long time to get to 20 or 30, and it would have been rough. Whereas now they're reverse engineering, what is the systems, what is the team we need to get into 10,000 schools with this? Who do we need to be, right? Back to your point, who do we need to be as a company to start getting those contracts? Also then, and so it's really leveled up even in 2 or 3 months, operations, organization, get the wrong people out, and who are the people we need to get the technology to the level where these schools are going to want us, but also who's the distribution who might be able to get us 1,000 schools just through one who, right? And so now they're just thinking entirely differently. They're thinking from scale. They're thinking as pros. Whereas before, I think that even though they had taken on a lot of funding, I think they were thinking as amateurs. And they were thinking in a really sloppy manner. Whereas now it's just like they have a clean goal. They got a clean path. They know they got to be the best. And no one else is doing what they're doing. It really differentiates them from all the other people that they were kind of competing against before. Now they're just playing a different game. Let's just get our thing into 10,000 schools. Let's get our who's. Let's just specialize right there.
So
and
good.
The crazy part, they fully know that they can do it. So
Right.
that's just the beautiful shift of when you go from scale, growth to scale, and you know you can do it. You get to the point where you know. Let me just give one more quick example.
We're not in a hurry.
We're
You're already here.
This one is funny because a lot of people think I don't have that courage or I don't have that ability. One of the people that I've worked with, the most timid, shy accountant you can think of. This guy is so nervous, and it took him 10 years to get his accounting firm to like 900,000. Right, 10 years, and they're good at what they do, And when he said, "Let's go for 10 million in 3 years," again, you use the goal to look at your system. You use the future to magnifying glass out the power law within what you're doing, or without. And by just looking at it, he realized we have 1,000 clients that pay us less than $1,000. Some of them pay us $200 to just do their normal, tax forms at the end of the year. He said we have 10 clients that pay us over 50 grand. So half of their revenue was with 10 clients, right? These more deep tax strategy. And so he said, obviously that's got to be our focus and our specialization to get to 10 million. We only need, we only need a couple dozen of them, right? Whatever. And so he was too afraid because he had all this incoming business to come in. He was too afraid to say no to him. And so after 3 months of continuing to say yes to the wrong stuff below the floor and knowing it,
Right.
and not focusing on the new pathway, he started to get just totally mad at himself. And so he had to say, his son works in the company. His son had to be the one to say no. So he said his son was the keeper of the floor, right? And so his son, and he was fine with that.
So good.
Yeah, by the way, know yourself, right? Know thyself. And so his son was very happy to say, no, like, we don't do that anymore, but here are some people that we can refer you to that we trust that will take phenomenal care of you, right? And so they set the floor, held the floor, stopped saying yes below the floor. But then what happened was his son started to think from the goal. How do we get to 10 million? We need 50 to 100 of these people who can do this deeper tax strategy. So his son started to join masterminds of financial advisors, because financial advisors have a lot of clients who are looking for this type of tax strategy. So he starts to develop a strategic partnership with just one of these financial advisors. And basically, the financial advisor says, I want to test one of my top clients with you on your tax strategy to see if it works. And if it works really well, I'll send them all to you. And so he sends his top client. They use their advanced tax strategy, save this guy 7 figures, and they make 6. So they make, and it just blows them away. And so then this guy says, okay, I have $10 million of business for you right now. Can I send you this $10 million of business? So remember, his goal was 10 million. And so now he has one
person.
Yeah. So
one
he's
who.
So his first year doing it, back to your story of the person in 2020. So their first year they went from just under 1 to almost 2. Their second year, they're actually going to probably blow past 15, because that one who said, I've got 10 million of business for you. Now there's other financial advisors like, we want to do this too. And so this guy is now going for 50 million in his accounting firm.
From 900,000 in 10 years.
Yeah. So
that's what I'm talking about.
So that's the shift, and he knows he can do it, right? Because remember, he got the rep above the floor, and they've raised the floor, so they've let go of the old model, and they're starting to get wins above it. Now they're seeing pathways to it, and so he's like, he knows he can do it. He believes he can do it, and they see the pathway doing it, and they're already like on that path. And so he's just like, Ben, like, I'm going for 50 now. How did this even happen? Like, you talked to me 2 years ago, we were at 900, maybe going for like 1.2.
I just got an idea. I've got to send it to myself. So keep talking. I don't want to forget this. I'm serious. I don't want to forget this.
Yeah. So let him keep going. And if you want to speak, you can. But you can't get to scale by solving for growth. And the future is a tool to shape the present, right? And you said something really phenomenal, Myron, which is, I think you said that you can't get to success or growth without disruption first. You said
disruption always follows intention.
Yeah. So that's extremely true. So even Peter Drucker said that the future's job is to be the enemy of the present. The future is going to disrupt the present. Like that's what it's going to do.
I feel like I'm in a fight with Mike Tyson right now, and I've got my arms are paralyzed. I can't even move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the disruption really is the past self versus the future self, and then eventually the raising of the floor and facing, whatever. All the projections you have about who you're going to disappoint and stuff like that. So he was so afraid of disappointing all of those people who he really loved, his old clients. He was so afraid of disappointing them when it's like, those people are going to be fine. Like
they are going to be fine.
He's going to transfer them to another accountant, and they're going to be awesome, and they'll be all right. Like, but he was making it such a mountain in his head, and now he's not. Now he's going for 50, and he's going to be all right. And but to your point of who. The goal also allowed his son to show up differently. Like once they started going for 10, his son could really flex new capabilities. His son could set the floor, hold the floor. His son could now go and filter for those really awesome strategic partnerships with the goal of being at, back them at 900,000. If they're going for 1.2, think of how much that would have diminished his son's potential. I mean, think about it. Think about what his son would have been doing. Like, you know what I mean? But now his son is opening up so many new opportunities and pathways, and it's unleashing his son.
Which is a side benefit that he didn't even realize was going to happen, which there are so many of those when you decide to scale. So many benefits that you could not have imagined that come with that are just mind-blowing.
What are you going to share, or is that super private, what you just put in your phone? If it is, that's all right. That's all right. Let's keep going wherever you want to go. I like it. That's not for you.
It is for you, but it's for future you. Okay.
You guys will know in a year.
No, you'll know next Monday. So the Tony Robbins said this is one of the like Tony Robbins said on an audio cassette tape series that I got from him a decade and 2 decades ago, at least 2.5, maybe 2.5 decades ago. He said that if you want to model, he told the story about how he consulted with the military to help people who couldn't pass their marksman's exam, and usually if people didn't pass it, they only got 3 tries and then they're out, right? And so he said he told the story about how he consulted with them to go help people who failed it the first time pass it the next time, and they only had like a 25%, something like that, really low percentage of people who took it the second time and passed. And so he told him he could like increase that to at least 80%. And so he goes in, and he says, okay, to whoever was over the army at that time, whoever the general was, he said, okay, here's what I need. I need your best sharpshooters, marksmen, and snipers. I need them to come into a room, so I need to ask them some questions. Okay. And he asked them some questions that got to these 3 things that he believes you have to model in order to duplicate any form of human excellence. And so one of them, the first question he asked was, okay, so how do you hold a gun? He said, they said, have you never shot a gun before? No, I've never shot a gun. You've never shot a gun before? How are you going to help these people pass? Right? Their belief that you have to have done the thing in order, but he knew that you only have to know how to develop really, really rapidly, right? And so he said, and he basically took their percentage from 20-something% up to 80-something% who would pass it the second time they took it. And he said, these are the 3 things that you have to model. You have to model, number 1, first and foremost, their belief systems. If you're having a conversation with somebody who's doing the thing you'd like to do, one of the best first questions to ask them is, tell me everything you believe about achieving this result. Okay? You have to model their belief systems. He said, number 2, you have to model their mental syntax. That's not just the messages they fire off in their brain, but the order in which they fire off those messages in their brain. He said, I can take the same words and put them in 2 different sentences and make them mean the exact opposite things because I'm putting them in a different order. And then he said, for instance, the dog bit Johnny. That's 4 words. I can take those same 4 words and make it mean the total opposite. Johnny bit the dog. And so syntax is important. So you find, okay, what do you do first? What do you think about second? What do you think about third? What do you think about fourth? What do you think about fifth? Like you find the order in which you do these, like model the order. So you model their belief systems, you model their mental syntax, and then he said you model their physiology. How do they carry themselves in space and time? He said because how you carry yourself physically causes you to fire off different messages in your brain based on that physiology. Like if I'm carrying myself like this, then I'm going to be firing off sad, downtrodden, defeated messages in my brain, whereas if I carry myself with a positive posture, I'm signaling to myself and everybody around me that I know where I'm going and I know what I'm doing and this is going to work, and it's a sense of certainty. And so I said all of that to say this. I believe that based on what you're saying and based on my own personal experience, based on what you're saying, like even the first time I heard you talk, it made me so hyper aware of this thing that I accidentally stumbled on in 1999 that changed my life forever. And it doesn't matter at what level. What I'm about to tell you works at every level, period. And that the thing that I discovered was it's easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a little money over a long period of time. But it's even bigger than that. It's easier to make great astronomical strides in any arena than it is to make incremental advances. It's way easier. It's way easier. And if you can just force yourself to believe that long enough to make the decision I made next, which is it's so much this, like I experienced 10x is easier than 2x without even knowing I experienced it, without ever hearing that concept, because as soon 1998 I made $48,000 for a year. You all heard me tell the story, but I'm going to tell it again. 1998 I made $48,000 for the year, and in April of 1999 I accidentally made $6,200 in 1 week. And when I made that $6,200 in 1 week, the first thing I said was, wow. Then I said it backwards. I said, wow. Then I said it upside down and backwards. Mom, wow. Okay. And then I decided, based on that new awareness, that must mean it's easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a little money over a long period of time. Well, if that's true, then I had a decision to make. Am I going to keep looking at all the hard ways to make a little bit of money? Or am I going to stop looking at and stop looking for the hard ways to make a little bit of money and only focus on the easier ways to make a lot? Now, that was from $6,200 in a week. Our business has averaged for years $30,000 to $32,000 a day. But that principle is still true. All of the things that I need to do to make a lot of money from there, whatever a lot of money is, $1 billion, from there, the things that I need to do to build a $1 billion business are easier than the things that we're doing to have a $15 million plus a year business. Way easier. And when I am willing to do what you said, you're going to have to stop doing all of the things, or a lot of the things that can't get you to $1 billion. But a lot of those things got me to $30,000 a day. How hard is it to stop doing $30,000 a day activities?
It's harder.
Right? It's hard to stop doing them. But the things that will bring $1 billion a year are much easier things. They're just totally different things. So that's where my brain was going when you, and so people have a hard time allowing themselves to believe that scaling is the easy path. Nobody has a hard time believing it's the best path. Most people have a hard time believing it's actually the easier path than growing.
It is, when we say easier, it will break you.
Right.
It will break you. It is psychologically rigorous to raise your floor, and to your point, but it's the simpler path. It is the simpler, more focused path, the path less taken.
Taking the path is the hard thing.
Oh yeah. Choosing the path.
Yes.
And one of the things you said earlier, though, is that higher scaled objective will force you to become 10x better. You know, I think about Myron and his level of mastery, and scaling are very similar concepts, right? That you get to this level of mastery and distinction, differentiation, where you're doing something at a level that there's no competition for it, right? And so the type of mastery that you'd have to develop over the next 2 or 3 years to achieve the 10x version of what you're doing now for a different type of person and organization and structure where you can take them to a new level. It's going to force you back to a new level of fundamentals and a new level of mastery and maybe a new level of faith and talent development, right? It's interesting when you think about even just the parable of the talents, right? That people who have 5 go to 10, probably to 100 to 1,000, right? Exponential talent development. Versus those who just choose not to develop the talent. And so, and that talent doesn't always have to be even your own. It could be capability. It could be leverage. It could be bringing in other who's, right? It doesn't always have to be solely to yourself, but it's the enterprise you're building and the talent you're building even in an organization. You know, an organization can have its own capabilities outside of you and an extension of you, right? Especially when you start bringing in really good who's. Right. I'm thinking about the who that you recently brought on. I'm thinking about the talent that person has, or the capability, or the resources. And so I'm thinking about what level of mastery and depth does Myron have to go to solve that 10x and to fulfill that? One of the things that I think a lot about is, you know, think about the things that you all do. What level do you take it to? Like a lot of people are doing many things at fairly average levels, right? And so they may be putting forth a lot of effort, exertion, but everything they're doing is like, maybe it's at the 60th percentile. Like it's just above average, right? And they're doing like 10 things just above average, where it's like, what if you could take this thing you're doing to an extreme expression? Think about Michelangelo. Think about the David. We still go and look at that David or the Sistine Chapel because whatever he did, he took it to such a level of mastery and expression. He's like, if I'm going to do this statue, I'm going to take it to this level of depth, this level of impact, this level of innovation, and we go still look at it, right? So it's like you taking whatever your 10x version is, what level of expression and impact can you take that mastery, right? If I'm writing a book, I want to say, what level of expression can I take this to? If I can get this not to the 99th percentile, but the 99.9999, it could become a power law. It might be able to speak to a Myron Golden, right? It might be signal to someone like this, right? And so it's like, are you willing to take what you do to that level of expression, that level of mastery, where, of course, there's no competition for that? And so I just think about what you could become, and even the type of faith you'd have to, impose.
Right.
And it would just be really exciting.
The things that I would have to.
It would be really exciting because if you think about value creation and if you think about skill development and innovation, even Steve Jobs said innovation is saying no to 1,000 things, including the things that are currently right now above your floor. To get to that level of innovation, you'd have to say no to the 1,000 things that are currently above your floor. That would go below it so that you could reach that level of innovation and mastery, which would be, from a value perspective, 10, 100x, 1,000x, because now you're getting that much further on the power law. And so it just goes exponential.
So good on so many levels of everythingness. Wow. Tell us, Dr. Ben, tell us more about practical ways that we can apply power law principles into our business, because we're here to talk about, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people scaling their businesses, scaling their income. People think it's hard. I found being poor very hard. I found it to be exhaustingly difficult and painful. And fortunately for me, I learned to hate being poor. And some people say, well, you should be content. I was content to not have much for a season, but I was not content to stay there. As I heard a preacher say a long time ago, it's not a sin for a bird to land on your head, but if he builds a nest up there, now that's a sin, because he doesn't have any business being there that long. Okay, so it's not a sin to be poor, at least not, but for me to stay poor would have been a terrible, terrible misuse of so many gifts. So what are some power laws that the people who are in this room right now and the people who are watching us on YouTube right now, what are some power laws that they can apply to their lives that will begin to cause them to have breakthroughs to new levels where old ceilings become below new floors?
Yeah. The first one is, you and I have talked about it at depth many times, is just that the future, psychologically, the future is a tool. And that the future is the thing that shapes your identity, and the future is the thing that shapes your choices and options. Like the future, your future, all of you, is the thing that's shaping your present. In other words, your goals are the things that are shaping your present. Anyone who's watching this online or listening here, you're only here because this is signal to your goals. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be here. So everything you do is based on your future. Roy Baumeister, one of my favorite psychologists, he and Marty Seligman and others created the whole field of positive psychology. But Roy did a lot of research.
What's his name? Roy what?
Roy Baumeister.
Baumeister. Okay.
Yeah, he's up at Florida State. He wrote Willpower, the book Willpower, but he's done so much research on this idea of prospection, which is that your views of the future shape your present, and how your future is what actually gives meaning to your present. And that goes straight back to Viktor Frankl, that your future gives meaning to your present and allows you to, when you have a why strong enough, you can bear anyhow, right? But Baumeister said that our own self is not a thing. It's a process. So your self is a process, and you use your future to dictate yourself. And so your future, we all use our future to organize our present, to organize even our own sense of self. Our self is not a thing; it is a process, and it uses the future to organize itself. So, so it's just that I would say is the fundamental principle is that your future shapes your present, and that once you understand that, you can scale your future in specific ways to disrupt and change and simplify and redirect your present dramatically and in key ways.
So would you say that your future shapes your present either intentionally or unintentionally? And what I mean by that is by decision or by default?
Amen.
Okay.
We all have goals, right? I think a lot of times we develop those goals just from the context we grew up in. We could even develop our future in reaction to past events, right? Traumatic experience, right? You go through some experience and then that shapes a future that you're mostly avoiding, right? A future that you don't want to deal with, right? And so we all have a future but you want to be the one who's choosing that versus it just having been given to you or it being a reaction, particularly to something that was negative or difficult. One of the most debilitating thing about trauma is what it does to your future. Trauma destroys hope, right? And hope is associated with goals.
Wow.
And so when a trauma is unresolved, that person has very little view of their future. It's all past. And the past is the driver, the past is the dictator, the past is the predictor, the past is the explainer of everything. And so until that person is willing to reframe that and turn it into value.
So is that the difference between somebody who feels like a victim of life? They feel like a victim of life because of what they feel like the past has done to them.
Yes. The past, so there's a concept called locus of control. And locus is another term for location. And so they're placing the locus of control
Outside themselves.
In
Their
the
past.
when they don't realize their past is inside their head.
And that's the only place it exists.
I don't have a past outside of my head, outside of me. Where would it be? You know what I mean? Like, and so my past is in my head, and I'm placing it outside of myself and giving it the control over me rather than realizing it's me in the present that shapes my past. And I have to use agency. The location of control is right here. Right? And so, yeah, so the future is the super tool. You know, the past is a phenomenal tool as well. These are tools. The past is a tool really for meaning and lessons. And so going back to that traumatic experience, a trauma is an event that was very painful, emotionally difficult, and that you're associating as negative value. It's the liability. It's because it happened to me, my present and future will always be worse. And so it's now cut off so much potential. It's now ruined so many things. And so that's a past that has not only neutral value, it has negative value. And so in the present, the only way to turn that into post-traumatic growth and benefits, blessings is, what are all of the forms of value I can have from this? So you have to create value. Just like imagination, you create a future. In the past, you have to create value. I have to, whatever traumas I've been through, I have to choose in the present to give that specific value and for it then to go from a liability to an asset. And I can take that asset, I can scale the asset of the past. And you got to get to a point where you also associate gratitude to it, where you realize God allowed me to have this so that I can be better, not bitter. And I'm glad it happened.
Right.
You get to the point where you're glad it happened and it has huge value. Now it's an asset. Now your future is huge again.
And see that I think that is one of the things that is a sign of is maturity.
Amen.
Because when I think of my childhood, which was what most people call really traumatic, I had polio as an infant because I was born here in Tampa in a segregated hospital. So I contracted polio after the polio vaccine was discovered because the conditions of that hospital were not up to par and they didn't have all the access that other hospitals had. When I was a child, the thing that I wanted to do more than anything else in the world, I wanted to be able to run. I couldn't run. So I learned how to fight.
But think about how much that could have shaped everything about your future.
But it did. But when I was a child, I hated the fact that I couldn't run. In fact, when I was a child, I could not say the word polio without tears welling up in my eye. Could not say the word without feeling agony in my soul.
It was too traumatic.
Right. It was too painful because it was the thing that made me different in my mind as a child in a worse way. Now, God allowed that. I'm gonna take it a step further. God didn't only allow that to be my experience of life. I believe that He ordained it. Why? Why do I say that? Because, and God didn't do it, but He ordained that it be done. And I don't have time to go into the theology of that right now. I'm just going to say it. Maybe I'll go to the theology of it another time. But He ordained in His sovereign wisdom because He knew what He created me for. So God in His sovereign wisdom ordained that my body slow down so my mind could speed up. So I wouldn't be distracted. I'm very athletic. And in the athletic arena, I'm very competitive. When I say competitive, I like to win. Y'all can judge me for this if you want, because I love to talk trash. Okay.
It's a fun arena for you.
It's fun for me. And so, so I would have been so distracted by sports and been very good. I probably would have been a professional athlete because I had enough discipline and enough coordination and enough physicality everywhere
and
except my
character.
and character and intentionality and courage. I was afraid of nothing, and so I would have had I probably would have been distracted by sports, which would have been great for me financially and fame and all that other stuff, but I would have missed out on all of this. All of this impact I would have missed. And so, whereas I was a child, I hated the fact that I had polio. I couldn't say the word polio. I hated the fact that I couldn't run. If God said, Myron, I'm going to give you a do-over, and you can have a do-over without polio, I would not choose it. I would choose the path I have already taken because it has impacted my life and given me the ability to impact the lives of so many other people that I wouldn't change a thing. And that lesson, what it taught me was, what that adult mature awareness taught me is that I don't have enough discernment to discern that something is good or bad. So since I don't have enough discernment to know whether something's good or bad, none of us can tell what's good or bad looking through the windshield of our life. We can only tell looking through the rearview mirror. I've just decided to trust that everything in my life, even the difficult stuff, is good, even when it doesn't feel good. So.
For you, not to you.
For me, not to me. Everything
Always
that
for
happens
you.
to me happens for me. And I'm going to embrace the part that's for me and trust the part that feels like it's against me is only there to make me stronger for the future thing that God knows I can do that I am not strong enough to do yet. So
This is the psychology of time. We're talking about the past phenomenal tool. You can even go back to this polio story and you can keep adding and stacking value to that. Value, gratitude, and it can enhance things. But the future psychologically is infinitely stronger in weight than the past. The past is incredible for learning, for filtering, for meaning, but the future is so much better, or it's not better, but it's a different tool for a different purpose, and its job is to shape, guide, and direct the present. And to the idea of the power law, if you scale the future, it will allow you to find the critical points that you can scale. Like when you go for, that's the beauty of scaling the goal, and especially giving yourself a short amount of time to do it. To back to your point of quantum leaps and sudden, that it's easier to make sudden changes than incremental ones. That's the beauty of what we call using time as a tool. Is you give this scale and you give it less time than seems reasonable. That forces quantum leaps, but it also, when you scale the goal up, right? I'll give a funny example. It allows you to find the power law that can get you there. The power law is the option that has the capability of getting you to the goal, including the person. So it's like if you're going for a 10x goal, most things can't get you there. They're going to fall below the floor, and those options, therefore, aren't in power law territory. Power law is the 1% of things that actually has capacity to the goal. So I'll give you an example. So there's a company that I was speaking in a room sort of like this, a bunch of entrepreneurs. It was an EO group, Entrepreneurs Organization. And I was teaching them the difference between growth and scale, and that these are different games. And one of the guys was listening. He said, I've been haunted ever since I read The Science of Scaling. He said,
that's a funny word.
Yeah, no, he said, I've been haunted. He said, because I have had my business for 25 years. He said, it took me 25 years. We're at 14 million revenue. They make these like electrical cables, these fiber optic. They make these fiber optic cables. And he said, I've been at this for 25 years. He's like, I'm ready to, he's like, what I want to do is I want to take the next 5 years to go from 14 to 20, and I'm going to have a great exit. I'm going to sell this thing for like $50, $60 million. I'm going to be in a great spot. I've poured the last 25 years into this company. He's like, I see the path. I believe I can get from 14 to 20 in the next 5 years. He said, but since I read The Science of Scaling, I'm like, well, maybe I should, rather than going from 14 to 5, maybe I should just go for 50. And that's not a 10x, but 14 to 50 in the next 3 years. And he said, but if I thought, how do I get to 50 in the next 3 years? I can't do it by selling the full cables. He said, what I would have to do is I would have to focus my company just on the electrical chip at the end of the cable. He said that's the most profitable part of our business, and he said no one actually just optimizes for selling the connector at the end of the cable. He said no other company does this. He said I would have to stop creating the full cable. He said if we just optimize our business for creating the connector at the end of the cable, he said that's first off the most profitable aspect. He said it would stop us from competing with the people who actually make the cables. He said it would.
And they would all become their partners.
He said we would have so many more partners. He said, and he said, and I asked him, I said, do you think if you just focused on the cables at the end that you could get to 50 million in 2 years? He said, I think that would be like the floor. He said we could go so much past it. And so like the reason I bring this up, and I'll finish the story, but when you operate from scale, it points out the power law. right? For him, the power law to scale for him was those cable, was the connector at the end of the cable. Like that was the thing to scale. That was the thing that had capacity to get to 50 million and beyond, right? The whole cable couldn't do it. Connector, if they just stopped doing everything and just focused on that, they'd be the only business doing it. So the beautiful part, back to the accountant, right? The scale objective pointed out the possible power law that if you focused on and created mastery on, took it to an expression, mastered it, So I'll fast forward this story. So I talked to him 6 months later. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna? And so I talked to him 6 months later, and he said, okay, here's what happened. I started to dig in, and part of their business, and I don't know these things. It's just kind of like Tony Robbins not knowing that industry. You don't need to know the industry to know the principles, right? And so he said, I went and I realized we have a certain code, like an engineering code, that's associated with our business that we've built up a reputation for the last 25 years, and that code is what enables us to make the cables and the connectors. He said, if we want to create a new business that's solely focused on this, we're going to have to get new code, and therefore we won't have the brand that we've built and established over these 25 years. I was like, okay, so get a new code. Get a new code. You still have all the relationships.
Right.
Like, you could be back to 14 million probably this year if you just did that. But, and one other, so that was one resistance, right, to the idea of resistance. All of a sudden there's this resistance. He's like, man, I'm going to have to get this new code. All of a sudden now uncertainty comes into play. Can we, with a new code, still have the same reputation? No, it's going to be a different it's going to be a different reputation. It's not. We're no longer those guys. We're these guys. And deals would have come so fast if they had done this. But also, he was like, we also have we've got like $6 to $10 million of already deals in place. I was like, couldn't you just sell those to people who are in that old model? He's like, yeah, we probably could have. So he ended up not doing it. He ended up saying, I see it, I know we can do it, but I've been on this path for 25 years. I'm going to stick to this path because it's certain, and because
that's a crazy confirmation bias right there.
Yeah, and he just said it feels too risky because he said that 50 million exit, right, feels so sure. It's 5 years away, whereas this one, he's like I can see it. There's no one else doing this. I believe, and I can push him again and again. If you went that path, do you think you get to 50 million revenue? Not valuation. This path is 50 million valuation. Do you think you can get to 50 million revenue in 3 years? He said, yes, I know I could. But it still feels too uncertain. And so he didn't do it. And that's all right, by the way.
It is all right.
It's all right. Like, I said, that's fine. That's your choice. But I tell that example because the scaled future shows you the possible power law. And it shows you what's below the floor to that future. And if you lean in and take that to expression, he would have to build another team. He'd build different types of partnerships. If he began operating from that future, if we're getting to 50 million in 3 years through chips, it's kind of like the idea beyond the idea. Like sometimes when I'm sitting and journaling, the original ideas are good, but that's like the idea after the idea after the idea. So it's like if he had actually been operating from that, in 2 years, he'd have opportunities and stuff like right now that would stack upon each other.
Right.
And it would start to compound. Exactly.
That's what we thought the same thing at the same time.
I'm just, my main point here is we all have the choice to operate from the past or from the future, but when you scale the future and you give yourself less time to the point of sudden quantum leaps, sudden transformation, it just points out the few pathways that could get you there. And if you lean into those and take those to expression, that'll take you to the 99.99 percentile. That's how you get to power law outcomes. That's how you separate yourself from competition. And he saw it himself. That would take me from competition.
Can I share how I discovered what, like in my own life,
Let's
I
do
experienced
it. Gotta hear it.
I experienced
Gotta hear it.
And I've told this story before, but it's okay. It's relevant now because when you talk, it makes me realize what's happened. And I didn't realize that it happened like that.
It's happened times and times again for you.
It
Look,
has happened.
You've done so many power laws.
Yeah, but I didn't even realize that's what I was doing until today. Okay. But a couple of years ago, 4 years ago to be exact, I had some distasteful experience on we will inconvenience you at our convenience airlines, which is all of them. I had one on American and one on Southwest in particular. And I decided on that inside a month. And one of them lost my luggage and it stayed lost for like 3 months. The other one caused me to, they had a delayed flight, which caused me to miss a connection. And I was going to be late getting back for something I was unwilling to get back late for. And so I had to buy all new tickets. And when I bought the new tickets, I'm on this plane, I decided this will never happen to me again. I made a decision. And sometimes people say, well, how do I do it? How do I do it? Sometimes it's better off when you don't know how. When you not only don't know how you're going to do it, don't even know how it works. Because like when I say, I am never going to do this again, I'm never going to subject myself to this again. I said, I will never fly commercial again unless I'm flying overseas in first class. I'm not even doing that unless it's on Emirates. Other than that, I only fly private, right? I had no idea how much it cost to fly private. I'd never looked into it. I'd never thought about it before. I thought about it, but never seriously enough to even look at how much it costs. And so I had this price in my mind. I had a trip coming up 2 weeks. Got to fly to Vegas and back. I had a friend who has a jet. Well, I called him, hey, Ed, you got a jet, don't you? He's like, well, I don't have a jet, but I have access to a jet. I said, okay, cool. I need to go to Vegas in 2 weeks and take some clients with me. And I'm thinking it's going to cost $25,000 or $30,000, which I'm willing to pay. He says, yeah, but it's going to be 60 grand. I said, it's going to be how much? He said, yeah, you got to put your big boy pants on if you're going to fly private. I said, I only have big boy pants. Get the jet. And so he booked the jet, and now I've got a decision to make. I have the money, but do I want to take money that's making me money and spend it on a plane ride? And it's not the only trip I have. It's just the first trip I have coming up. What can I do? Oh, I know what I'll do. And this is where the power law came in. I don't want to spend the money that I have. I'm certainly not going to borrow the money. So what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to create an offer that will pay for this trip. So I said, I'm going to sell a VIP day. I'm going to let somebody spend the day with me. I used to charge $25,000 an hour for coaching. If they spend 8 hours with me, that'd be $200,000. $200,000, you get to spend the day with me. You get to fly with me on the private jet to Vegas and back, and any other trips I have over the next 12 months. You get access to my $55,000 mastermind, and I'm going to interview you on my YouTube channel. So that was the offer.
Quite an offer.
Right, quite an offer. I made that to a couple of my clients. The first 2 guys I offered it to said yes. The first 2 guys I offered it to said yes. So now, and then I said, well, what else could I do? And so I was going to speak for somebody else. I charged them for half of the plane ride. So they paid me $30,000 for expenses towards the jet ride. So now I brought in $430,000. The trip only cost me $60,000. I've got $170,000 profit. I got paid $170,000 to fly private to Vegas. I'm like, that's interesting. But if I wouldn't have made the decision to fly private, which was way outside my current spending comfort zone,
without question,
I would have never discovered the power law to make the offer. But it gets better. I decided that I needed to raise my prices of my coaching because from $25,000 an hour to $40,000 an hour, which sounds like a crazy decision to make, I know, but I decided it. But I decided because I don't like doing coaching, so only the serious need apply. Right? So I'm raising to $40,000. And then I said, but that math doesn't make sense at $200,000 anymore, so I'm going to have to raise that too. So I told everybody in my mastermind, here's what's going to happen. Next year, this was in October of that same year of 2022. Next year, this price is going to somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. If you want to get it at $200,000, you need to get it now. 16 people said yes. That's $3.2 million more dollars. And I ended up having some other people pay for the jet fee when I got ready to go somewhere. I ended up doing $3.9 million in revenue on that offer inside the first year, and I only spent $1.7 million on flying private, which means I made $2.2 million profit because of the power law that I discovered that I wouldn't have discovered if I would have allowed myself to keep playing small and letting We Will Inconvenience You at Our Convenience Airlines inconvenience my life because they could. And so I discovered that power law. That offer since then has made me since I started, has made me $14 million from that one power law of I'll just create an offer to pay for it. And that changed everything for me. So instead of saying it costs too much to fly private, or I can't afford to fly private, or I don't want to spend enough money to fly private, I just asked the question, what do I have to do in order for me to only fly private? And when I asked that better question, guess what I got? I got a much better answer and discovered a power law. Now, and that has impacted so many other people's lives. Like one of my clients, the first person who bought that offer from me, from the promotions of his event that he did on my YouTube channel, he had a $5.7 million day from that one. So I got $200,000. He did an event that he promoted on my YouTube channel. People came to that event. He created an offer, made that offer, did $5.7 million in sales in one day at that event. And so what I'm saying is I discovered this power law principle. And even though what I'm saying is you don't have to know how. In fact, I think asking how you're going to get there is probably a bad idea.
It's a bad start.
It's a bad start. That's not a good way to start. Thinking that you need to know how before you decide you're going to do something is almost always a terrible idea.
The point of the impossible goal is that you don't know how to do it in the beginning.
That's the point of the impossible goal, is that you don't know how to do it. Why? Because it's going to expose you to power laws. This is something new. I just learned about power laws today, but I apparently have been applying some of them.
You would have to be applying them if you're at the 99.9 percentile and beyond, because that's where they begin.
Wow.
And so you would have to be applying them if that's where you're at, which is a select few things create the majority of results.
So you shared something with me, or maybe with us earlier in the audience. Something. Can we draw on the board, Michael, or no? Yeah. Okay. So can you draw the power law curve and explain it to us in a drawing on the digital board?
Let's do it.
Okay. Because I want to. I want to see.
I don't know how to use this.
Just like a pen and paper. Yep. Just like that.
All right. Here.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Cool. So this is the bell curve.
Okay. That's the bell curve.
That's the mean. These are standard deviations.
And the mean is the
middle
average.
Yeah,
it's the
50th
average.
percentile. One standard deviation out is 84. Then you get to 97. Then you get to 99.7. That's 3 standard deviations. So if you're already here.
What determines here? Like what? So what is the mean? What is the?
So it's always on different measures.
But as an entrepreneur, the mean revenue-wise.
If you go revenue, right? And so if revenue in the United States, there's
Yep.
34 million companies.
Right.
So yeah, if you're at the mean here, that's 50,000.
$50,000 a whole year.
Yeah, 50,000 revenue. Jump 1 standard deviation, it's 500K.
That's mind
Then 5 million, then 50 million. But the thing is that the standard deviations go way out. So to get to the fourth.
Is that 50 million valuation or 50 million in revenue?
50 million revenue.
Okay.
So this is a revenue.
Mm-hmm.
This is a revenue measure.
Okay.
You could do these types of standard deviation. You can look at these things from height. You can look at it from revenue. You can look at it from profit. This is revenue. But the thing is that the further out you go, and this is called the tail, the more exponential it becomes. So to get to 4, so this is 3 standard deviations. To get to 4 standard deviations, now you're doing 18 billion revenue. And then to get to 5, which is this extreme tail, you're doing like, well, it's really
5 standard deviations.
Yeah, 400 billion. There's only 17 companies at this level.
Wow.
So like this is, but think about it, 600. You have to be at 400 billion. Sorry, there's a 4.
400 billion.
So
is 6 standard deviations away from the mean.
5.
5
from the mean. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. And so, sorry, this one needs to go away. But the whole point is it gets way more exponential. But this right here is the starting point for power laws. This is the starting point. Anything beyond here, the results start to get way more exponential, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's 2 ways to look at the world. There's a bell curve way of looking at the world, or there's a power law way of looking at the world. The bell curve way of looking at the world puts all the emphasis on the mean. So the mean is the focus. The mean is the center of gravity, and everything clusters around the mean, right? That's this idea that, and so if you think in a bell curve world, you're thinking like everyone else. You're thinking like the mean. Whereas when it comes to results don't operate on the mean. Results operate on a power law. And so the idea is that 99+% of results come from the outliers. The outliers rule the world in a power law world. So it's like, the examples I gave were 99% of the books are written, or 99% of the book sales out there come from less than 1% of the authors, right? In a power law world, the differences are extreme, right? So like 600 billion revenue is like, it's like 13 million X bigger than the mean. It's 13 million X bigger. And Harry Potter books sell, the average book that comes out sells less than 100 copies.
Wow.
And so if you want to play in the power law world, you just have
100 copies ever?
Yeah, ever. The average book, there's 4 million books published a year. The average book sells less than 100 copies. That's this. But there's a few books, and again, it depends on what you're going for. You might not be optimizing for book sales. That might not be the thing. It might be a book that generates hundreds of millions of revenue, right? There's different measures, and you got to decide what's the measure you want to play. But it's just, you got to acknowledge that power laws are what rule results. And so if you start to acknowledge that, then you can't make decisions below here. Anything below here is going to converge you back to the mean. They even call it reversion to the mean. That's competition, right? Convergence and competition are the same. Strategy is about differentiation. Strategy is about not doing what other people are doing. It's about being different. Michael Porter, the guy who created the whole field of strategy, said strategy is not about beating competition, it's about escaping competition.
So good.
And so if you make that your starting point, you're going to say no. Remember, a goal properly set is halfway reached. Because if you set the goal properly, the majority of options that are competitive are no longer, they're going to all be below the floor. So it's going to force you to start finding who's, pathways, etc., that are going to immediately start taking you to a power law level of value creation.
So good, Dr. Ben. Wow. that reminds me of the first time I ever heard you speak. Like you talked about 10x is easier than 2x and the 80-20 principle. This, and then I came up and asked you about Price's Law. Do you remember that?
I remember you talking to me about it, yeah.
Right. Is this like, so this is similar to Price's Law. This reminds me of Price's Law because you have to even apply Price's Law to the results of Price's Law. And that's how you get to this. That's what I was thinking of when you were talking about this, right? 50% of the production of any domain is produced by the square root of that domain. So if you have 4 salespeople on a sales team, half the sales are going to be made by 2 people. That makes sense because 2 is half of 4, but it's also the square root of 4. But if you take the square root to 3, 3 is the square root of 9. So if you have 9 salespeople, half the sales and half the commissions are going to be made and earned by 3 people out of the 9. But if you take it all the way up to 10, if 10 becomes the square root, and you have 100 salespeople on a sales team, half the commissions and half the sales are done by 10 salespeople.
Yep.
And
it
so
just
the
gets
bigger,
more exponential.
exactly, the bigger the domain gets, the smaller the percentage of the square root is of the total as it gets bigger. And so you have to keep applying that over and over and over and over again. And it's just kind of mathematically mind-blowing. And this is like a quantum leap on Price's Law because it just shows you that the further you get from the average, there's less competition, there's less friction, there's less restriction, there's less. Okay, he thought. Okay, come on.
Yeah. So
Let's
you and
go.
I were talking about the difference between growth and scale.
Yes.
And that you can't get to scale by solving for growth.
Right.
So if this guy right here, this is even a 10x, which is phenomenal.
Right.
Right. But if you can't get to here by solving for this.
Right.
That's whoa. I don't know. I just said
just
that.
undo. Hold on. Yeah, there's an undo thing.
I don't need to draw anymore.
Okay. Cool.
But that's solving. We might even consider that as a semi-scale, but really you can't get to here by solving for this.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Oh my goodness! It just made my head hurt.
No, here's
I just
another
had a thought. No, anyway. Go ahead.
Share the thought.
It reminds me of a rocket ship when it's reaching, like it uses 90% of its fuel to escape the Earth's atmosphere, and then once it gets out of the Earth's atmosphere and it's in orbit, it burns no fuel.
Boom, boom.
This is orbit.
This is orbit. But also you can't get to orbit by solving for staying on the ground.
Exactly.
Because that's building a car.
Right.
That's
even building a jet.
Yeah.
Even if you build a jet, you don't get to reach escape velocity.
Yeah. So, but one thing that's wild is think about this company here. This company here at 50K can comprehend this. It can't comprehend this.
Right.
And so what they say is that you can't comprehend something unless you're at least within 1 standard deviation of it.
Mm.
So that's why they say genius. It takes genius to see genius, right? Because if you're out here, think about it, this person can't even fathom what a $50 million company looks like,
Right.
unless he starts thinking from the goal, unless he starts solving it and getting information from the goal. And so, as it gets further out, they say that when it comes to talent, like the number 1 in any domain is actually 10x or 100x better than number 2. Because they're so far away that no one else can even comprehend what they're doing.
Right. Which is why Tiger Woods was number 1 in the world for like 7 years.
And he was
so much better than everybody else who ever played the game.
The gap was huge.
Yeah, like the numbers are not even remotely close. Like when you were talking about that, I realized I had an awareness, but it left me. It'll come back. Here it is.
Give it.
The reason there's a communication gap between people who are super successful, the reason people who are struggling to figure out business have a hard time learning, like understanding what people who are not struggling in business are saying, is because there's a communication gap, and that communication gap is based on how many standard deviations they are away, and that communication gap exists because the awareness gap is there. Like what a person who's operating based on the mean is aware of is too many standard deviations away from the person who's doing 50 million. So when that person's talking, it just sounds like they're making noises. They could they might as well be speaking a foreign language. But the same thing is true. Like when if I'm coaching somebody and they're trying to tell me why it's so hard and why it's so impossible, I don't even have the ability to process what they mean. Like I don't understand. Like I can't comprehend that somebody can even believe that what you're saying you believe is true. Because there are too many standard deviations away in their awareness and the communication. And that's why I think it's so important for all of us to expose ourselves to people who are several standard deviations away by reading those books and listening to people that we don't understand why they believe what they believe or what they believe, so that our awareness can level up, so that then we can, just me having a conversation with a guy who's been in business for 7 years, who did 200 million last year, opened up something in me that said, again, it's going to sound self-serving and braggadocious. I don't mean it that way. I am one of the best sales trainers and salespeople who's ever walked on planet Earth. And I'm not bragging on myself. It's just an observation because I
You're a
understand.
power law in that domain by far.
Right. So, but if I really recognize that, why would I not do more with it than I'm doing now?
Why don't you take it
Right.
further down the tail?
Exactly. That's the point. And he made me realize that it's easy to. I mean, it's pretty easy to get comfortable at $15 to $18 million a year. It's pretty easy to get comfortable, but to be willing to make yourself uncomfortable enough to go to the next standard deviation or beyond, that's the game, because that's the real game of becoming.
Another way of looking at this, by the way, like we're looking at the tail this way, but if you look at it in terms of results, obviously it goes like this. Like, but it goes so high here because, like,
Right.
it's just like you can't even see it when it's here. But
Right.
the thing is by the time you're out here, any marginal difference creates an exponential. So for you, for example, you're already for sales. I don't know where you are, Myron, but like for your domain, you're in the 99.999. Like you're at deep mastery.
Right.
But anytime you keep going this way, those nines can keep going. Anytime you go this way, even fractionally at this point, it's going to go exponential.
Right.
Because you're so far out there
Right.
that, I mean, this, even just like a 0.1% leap, right? Or, it's going to take you 10x. Like the 10x's just get more and more exponential as you get out on this curve.
Wow.
That's why the whole idea of the power law just gets more extreme.
So good. And so here's one of the things that you're going to have to guard against, because now I'm going to draw on his drawing. Because if you're operating from the mean, so I'm going to
That's
shrink
some
this a
serious
little bit.
competition right there. That's a painful world to operate at the mean.
Yes, it is very painful. But if you're operating at the mean, and you have somebody who's two standard deviations away, this person right here, to you, from this person's perspective, this person is either lying or scamming.
They're incomprehensible.
Right.
Anything beyond a standard
Right.
deviation is
Right.
hard to comprehend.
Right. This person here, this person over here, in the mind of this person, is a fictional superhero character.
They're evil. They might even be evil.
Right. They might even be evil. They might even be evil. And so because the awareness that this person operates from, and the level of concepts that they communicate based on that awareness, cause this person to conclude, in order for somebody to be saying the things they're saying, something about them has to be illegitimate, because if it's not them, something about them is illegitimate. It must be me, and it certainly can't be me.
Doesn't fit within their frame.
Yes.
The concepts, the signals just don't.
They don't match.
Yeah, it's noise in their frame.
Wow. So.
It's honestly actually not comprehended, to the idea of
Right.
readiness. It just washes over. You can't even see it.
Right.
Until you start digesting it, and you really can't start digesting it until you start trying to solve it.
Right.
Once you start trying to solve it, all of a sudden you're trying to digest it. So you're working harder to understand the signals. You're open to conversations. You're willing to let go of old models, old ideas. So only when you start trying to solve it can you start, generating the pathways and finding the understandings to get there.
So good. And by the way, this applies in business, it applies in finance, it applies in relationships, it applies in fitness, it applies to every aspect of your life. The exponential gains that you are looking for are on the other side of a decision you don't understand how to make, but you have to make it before you understand how to do it. Like, it's on the other side of a decision you don't understand how to accomplish, but you don't need to understand how to accomplish it. Like, if you can trust that you don't need to know how to do it, you just need to decide to do it. It'll change everything for you. Everything.
You definitely don't know how to do the impossible goal when you set it.
Right.
That's the beauty, is now you have to start solving for new pathways, new knowledge, new who's that are way beyond your current thought process. But now you're actually trying to solve it, right? One of my favorite quotes from Dan Sullivan is just that your eyes can only see and your ears can only hear what your brain is looking for, right? That's selective attention, right? And so now that you're solving it, to the example that I gave you before with that guy who found that super who, that CFO super who. Once he started to solve for how the heck do I do 200 locations in 3 years? What kind of finances? We need a super CFO. Now he's looking for it. Whereas before that, I asked him, in your old business, his old franchise business, did you even have a CFO before? No. I did everything. He didn't have a C-suite. He didn't have any form of scaling organization. In his old model that took him 15 years to grow, he didn't even have a CFO, whereas the first move he needed to make once he came up with the new 10X model was, I need a super CFO. He went and got an amazing one. He didn't even have that in his old model. Like it wasn't needed. It wasn't needed
Right.
from that other goal.
Right.
It wasn't needed from growth. But now he's operating from
scale.
scale. He needs now these different who's. He needs this different capacity, this different capability. And because he was operating from scale, meaning operating from the future, he made extreme outlier decisions that his past self would have made. He's now making decisions that are way beyond, they're on the tail of decisions. And he's bringing on who's that are at the tail of capacity now. He's bringing in a who that knows how to be the CFO of a multi-billion-dollar organization. That who was not available when he was operating from growth.
So now you have the compounding effect of all of these who's that are many standard deviations away from the mean.
Yeah, they're closer to the goal. You're bringing on who's at the level of the goal. And you're using the goal to attract those who's.
So good. So good.
And the who's that would have been phenomenally acceptable and exceptional before are below the floor now. Which is okay. I mean,
Right.
There's no value judgment here.
Right. The value of the people.
No. There's no
but
value judgment. It's
how much value can they add to the journey? How much value can they add to the goal? And if they can't add value to the goal, they're beneath the floor.
Yeah, it's relevant to the goal.
Right.
It's relevant to this thing's objective. A
Right.
company has its own objective, right?
Right.
I, as a person, have a different goal than my company, right? The company has its own goal. And so it has its own agenda, and so its goal is going to determine what's relevant and irrelevant, including my aspect in it. My own personal goals, those are very different.
Right. Wow. So good, Dr. Ben. So here's, we've been going for a while. So let's tell folks how they can learn more from you. Where can they find out more about Dr. Benjamin Hardy? Where can they get transformational information from you? Where's the best place for them to go look?
Read The Science of Scaling.
Read The Science
That's
of
my
Scaling.
newest book with Blake Erickson. He's the co-founder of scaling.com. So Science of Scaling is the closest book to this thinking, I think, that exists, but it's the closest that I've written. So read The Science of Scaling, and then just go to scaling.com. That's our advisory program for people who want to 10x their business in 3 years or less.
Cool.
Using this framework. I will say I'm almost done writing the next book, which is called Power Law Strategy.
I was going to ask you that. When is that book coming out?
This year. It'll come out in 2026.
Let's
it'll come
go.
Out, you'll get it soon.
Let's go.
But it'll come out soon. Power Law Strategy.
Let's
so,
go.
Yeah.
Wow. As we wrap up this YouTube live, what questions should I have asked? If you were interviewing you, what would you ask you that would really be beneficial for everybody watching?
I'm gonna flip it just to mess with you and just say, what's the number one thing you got out of it for you, Myron? I'd rather just push on you and just say, for you personally, because you're already an extreme outlier in and of yourself.
Yeah.
What's sticking out for you personally? What's the signal for you?
That the 10x easier than 2x, the $1 billion goal, for instance, is even easier than I thought it would be before we started the conversation, because the things that you showed me to focus on gave me some very, very specific things that I need to go look at, what needs to be eliminated and what needs to be, what is signal and what is noise. That's what, me saying 100 million, you saying, okay, but what did you have to do to get to $1 billion in 3 years? It's like, oh, yeah, that's a much better question. And realizing that that's a better question, and as I started thinking about the answers to that, oh, that's going to be way easier to get to than I thought even before we sat down and started this conversation. That's what I got at, the feeling. And here's why I'm emphasizing the word feeling, because I believe that human beings are singularly motivated, and what I mean by that is human beings are motivated by one thing and one thing only, and that is what they do, rather, based on one thing and one thing only. What do I feel like doing? And most people attempt to make themselves do the thing, when what would work better is learning how to make yourself feel like doing the thing. And you showed me how to make myself feel like doing $1 billion in revenue. That's what I got out of that.
And if someone can do it, is Myron.
Oh, easily.
If someone can do it, it's Myron operating from his future self.
1,000%.
And that's going to take you to a level of mastery and innovation
Right.
that at your level already is going to get so valuable. Think about how much further away that takes you from competition as you master at that level to get to that.
And one of the reasons most people don't step into operating at that level is because their perception of it being difficult makes them feel like, well, nobody would ever do that because it's too hard. But it's never a good idea to assign a level of difficulty, like something's going to be so hard, before you even set your foot in the arena. That's all. There's never a good reason to do that. Right? Yeah. It's doable. That's all I need to know. Hard, easy. It's doable. It's doable. I might as well be the one to do it.
And you'll find as you get into the mud of it that it was way harder than you thought, and that maybe if you actually understood the magnitude, it's still easier than just not doing it. But once you get into it, but as you start solving it, you'll bring the capacity, you'll bring the capability, you'll have your breakthroughs, and you'll get the wins that will just, it'll show you. I mean, if you think about the bell curve from where you started
Right.
to where you're at now,
Right.
the level of distance and rarity of transformation and growth you've already experienced is magnitudes more than what we're talking about. Like to get from where you started to where you're at now is probably 100 X's more difficult than to get you from where you're at to $1 billion.
I
mean, it's
100%.
you know what I mean. It's like, you know, it's
100%
like,
concur.
yeah. I mean,
yes.
Well, because put it this way, again, just going back to revenue, you know, less than I think it's like less than 2 or very few ever get past $1 million revenue, right? So even to get to that level is rare. To get to 10 million, it's like 10% of that, and so it just gets more and more rare. Obviously, if you operate from it, raise the floor, you can do it. If you operate from the goal, bring capacity from the goal, you can do it. But just getting to 1 million revenue is rare. You know, it's not 95% or more of companies won't get there, right? To get to 10, now you're already in the 99 percentile levels. And,
Wow.
and so it's like, it just gets, so where you're already at is already, it was rare enough. And so, but you're now already, as you already said, you understand the principles.
Right.
You understand how to have the breakthrough, the psychological flexibility, how to shatter a new ceiling. You might not know how to do it on this one, but
I know that I can.
But you know you can. You've done it so many times before.
Right. Wow. So good. So good.
Brother.
Always a pleasure. Dr. Ben Hardy, y'all. Wow. Wow. Thanks for watching.